Welcome to the MBS College Football Vlog, Week 3. That's Sammy Bunt, Daniel Preston, I'm Robert Reamer. It's been a good 2 weeks of college football, and now we're starting to get into things a bit. It's not so new this season anymore. And one thing we've learned in the first 2 weeks is, again, the Big Ten is going to be struggling this year, it seems. What do you think of that, Sammy?
Well, Robert, the Big Ten had a really rough week last week. Michigan coming off of a big loss against Alabama, playing Air Force and actually almost falling in that one. Iowa falling to Iowa State. The big one, Wisconsin, falling to Oregon State. So what I really see is I don't think the Big Ten is quite going to be up there as an elite conference, but it's still going to be interesting to see. I mean, this is a very interesting conference with a lot of good players and good teams, so maybe they won't be up to the task to take on the SEC, the Pac-12, the Big 12. I think it'll still be interesting to watch this year.
I think the Big Ten isn't going to be a very good conference this year. I think Michigan State, which everyone is predicting to be the best team, is overrated in my opinion. I think Ohio State, one of the best teams, is obviously not allowed into the postseason, so that's a big disadvantage for the Big Ten. I actually think the best team in the Big Ten right now is Michigan, and a lot of people are overlooking them because of that big loss to Alabama, but I don't think a lot of teams could have done that much better against Alabama. So I think Michigan will be at the top, but Nebraska struggles on the road, and Wisconsin, I think they lost a lot of people. Russell Wilson was a lot more important than people think. So I think people should have seen this coming, and I think it's not as expected.
Yeah, I think you guys have essentially covered everything. I think the Big Ten, I mean, we're not going to say they're like the worst conference out of the BCS 6, but I mean, we're going to say that maybe they're not the second best conference or the best conference. And the reason why the Big Ten's always put into that discussion is because they have the TV contract with the Big Ten. They're thought of as like the premier conference, at least in regard to money and TV, people who are watching on TV. So I think that's partially the reason why there's such a big controversy. And I think Big Ten, they're a pretty good conference, but I think they're a long way from being the best. Michigan, Ohio State are starting to get better, but it might be quite a while until they actually surpass the SEC.
Well, Robert, I think the big word surrounding the Big Ten is tradition. And these are some teams with fabulous tradition, but there are a lot of problems. Penn State is off to an 0-2 year. I think we all know why. Michigan not living up to their true potential. Iowa, even supposed to be one of the better teams, is lost to Iowa State, almost fell to Northern Illinois in the first week. So there's been a hearty tradition, but doesn't look like they've had it in the last couple of years.
All right, so I don't think we're going to be seeing any Big Ten teams in this. The best team in the nation now, we're going to discuss. Daniel, who do you think is the best team?
I'm sticking with Alabama. I don't see any reason to verge away from Alabama. I've had them at number 1 throughout the year, beating Western Kentucky 35-0. It wasn't going to be that tough of a game, so they didn't go all out to blow them out like some other teams would. USC, not the greatest game against Syracuse, but it was weird conditions, so I won't be too rough on them. And LSU, I think they proved that they're good, but I still don't think their offense is as good as Alabama's is, so I'm going to keep Alabama at number 1.
Okay.
For me, I had Alabama at number 1 last week. I had LSU at number 1 the first week, and I'm going to go back to LSU as my number 1 team in the nation. And that's because I really think Washington is going to have a good season this year. I think they're a good team, but it really just showed how LSU is at that elite level, that they really could just completely outplay Washington. I still think Washington will be a top 20 team this year. Just the fact that LSU was so much higher than them. I mean, Michigan, too, with the Alabama game, but I just saw a bit more dominance in the LSU performance over Washington. So their defense especially really impressed me, only letting up 3 points to one of the nation's premier quarterbacks.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to stick with USC, but I think the top 3, they're so even in my mind. I think, really, if they were to play, it would be all up to chance. You could probably just flip a coin. But I think I pick USC only because they have such a dynamic offense. And I feel like the defense is, although they're good, these are offensive players that are going to be playing the NFL soon at an elite level for USC. I think Matt Barkley, he said it's like playing a video game with his wide receivers. I think USC, maybe they're not going to be as dominant against the other teams because their defense isn't as good as Alabama and LSU. But I think when they if they play that game in the national championship against one of them, I think they're going to come away victorious. It's going to be a close game, I'm sure, but perhaps high scoring. But I think I'm going to stick with USC, not by much, but I'm still going to stick with them. Now moving on, we're going to do some upset picks for this week. Sammy?
Well, my upset pick coming into this game is taking the North Carolina Central team over Duke. And the reason that I'm taking this is Duke has been a joke the last couple of years. We saw them lose to an FCS team, Richmond, last year. Richmond finished 3-9 in their FCS division. Duke came out against Stanford thinking maybe we have a shot this year. They looked pretty impressive against FIU, but that isn't saying much. They came into that Stanford game. Stanford, by the way, I do not think is going to be a very good team this year either. But they came into that Stanford game with a lot of confidence, and they came out, shot out right on their bottoms right there. So it really shows you how Duke really isn't going to be an established team. They're playing in a pretty easy ACC conference, and I just don't see how good they are. North Carolina Central, on the other hand, could be one of the better teams in FCS this year. Look for an FCS team to top a top-scale FBS team this week.
As much as it pains me to say this, Ohio State, one of the teams I support, I just don't see it happening this week. They've had 3 scholarship running backs out right now with Jordan Hall, Carlos Hyde, and one other running back, freshman, Warren Dunn. And I think they don't, lacking depth there. Too much is going to be on Braxton Miller's hands, and he's not going to be able to carry the whole load. And even if he had to, Urban Meyer is trying to take down his workload, which I think is really going to make the Ohio State offense stagnant this week against a decent California team that can put up some points. And they have one of the best wide receivers in the country, and I think he's going to really exploit Ohio State. And I think it's going to be a close game, but Ohio State's going to lose it.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Kansas over top 20 ranked TCU, and the reason why I say this is I think TCU, they're going to have some struggles as they had, contrary to what they had before in the Mountain West Conference. Now starting to play a lead opponent week after week. I think Charlie West is a good coach. I think he had a rough couple of years at Notre Dame towards the end, but he had a great first 2 years with Notre Dame, bringing them to a lot of success with Brady Quinn. And I think Kansas this year is going to be one of the more improved teams in the Big 12, and I'm looking for that to be an upset. But now we're going to go to the game down south. It's going to be number 1, Alabama versus Arkansas. Daniel?
Well, I have Alabama as my number 1 team in the nation. Arkansas coming off a huge upset against Louisiana Monroe. And on top of all that, they have their star player, Tyler Wilson, the dynamic QB, out for the game. I really don't see any hope for them other than that they're at home. I see Alabama running away with this game in the second quarter and on.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Alabama's going to win this game. I think Arkansas has too many question marks. They don't have their coach. I would doubt the team chemistry is too good. But now let's go to Sammy over here. The last 2 weeks he picked Washington over LSU. He picked Michigan over Alabama. Now the point differential, not very good. But let's see. Is he going to go with another big upset?
The Louisiana Monroe loss for Arkansas, as it was tragic, I think it was a developing game for them. They do not have their star quarterback, Tyler Wilson, but I think Alabama's overlooking this Arkansas team. I think Arkansas is very good defensively, even though they didn't quite show it. When it was a little bit unexpected that they lost their backbone. So I'm looking to see what Arkansas can do against this Alabama team. So I am picking, you guessed it, the Alabama Crimson Tide. I just do not see how you can take Arkansas in this one. Tyler Wilson is a big loss for them, and although Arkansas will make it a little bit closer than I think the experts predicted, I think Alabama is just too strong in this one, and I think they're going to take this one. They're going to handle this team pretty easily.
Now another big SEC game this week is Florida going to Tennessee. And Daniel, what do you think?
I think Florida looked great last week against Texas A&M. I think they had a really good second half, and Will Muschamp is really, starting to settle in at Florida and implant his system in a good way. I think they're playing good football, playing very good defensively, and are putting up enough points that they're going to be able to win this game against Tennessee.
All right, Sam.